Following up my introductory video about 5G, I want to discuss whether or not there is a plausible connection between 5G and the coronavirus slash COVID-19 pandemic slash crisis or any other sickness that we know of. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Youssef Dunbar, and this is Big Discussions 76 Science and Technology. First of all, please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. So in this video, I want to discuss whether or not there is a plausible connection between this new technology we call 5G and the coronavirus slash COVID-19 pandemic slash crisis or any other sickness known to man. And if you're unfamiliar with 5G, I think I shot a nice introductory video on it and why it's important, and I'm going to leave that in the description box below. And that video was actually shot for the layperson, and I would put myself, as it relates to 5G and other forms of technology and in other scientific areas, I would call myself a layperson, because not every scientist knows everything about all science, and there's always more to learn within your own discipline and about other disciplines. So it turns out that this whole 5G business, this topic is radioactive, and later on in this video you'll see why I just laughed at that word. But it's a bit of a hot potato, and there's lots of content out there on YouTube right now, and I'm sure on other digital platforms about why this new technology is dangerous and it's bad and it's evil. And so, right now my intention is to shoot this video on it and then just back away from this topic unless something warrants me going forward with it. But as I always say, one video spawns another video spawns another video, so this might turn into a whole series at some point. So I'm broaching this topic because it's being speculated about, and as I said, there's lots and lots of content about why this thing is evil and why this thing is bad and why it's going to lead to the apocalypse if it hasn't already. And so in terms of the media and human nature, once a theory gets out there and people start believing it and buying into it, it can gain traction, and it can be like a snowball rolling downhill, gradually getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and before you know it, you have a whole hysteria and a mass fear and a mass panic, and once that train has left the station, oftentimes it's not coming back, and you have to deal with the ramifications of that train leaving the station. So there's a lot of content out there about 5G and what it's thought to be, and I want to put emphasis on thought. And from what I've been seeing, there's a lot of thought and speculation without a lot of concrete evidence and data. And I first heard about this, and I'm always late to the party, and I heard about this for the first time when I was home in Buffalo a couple of weeks ago. I stopped over at my cousin's house, my cousin Tammy. I'll just call her my cousin Tammy. And we were talking, and as I was on my way out the door, she started going on and on and on about the 5G causing the coronavirus. She said, "Have you heard anything about it on Facebook? They're talking about the coronavirus being connected to 5G, and it's causing all these bad things, and the towers are everywhere." And it was just, she was like, and I was like, well, I told her I haven't heard anything about that, and this is my first time hearing this discussion, and there was a disconnect in my mind immediately in terms of, at least as it relates to the coronavirus, how this new type of technology, which basically involves sending signals from our cell phones to towers, how something like that could give rise to a respiratory sickness, which is manifesting as flu-like symptoms where people need to go to the hospital to get intubated and put on respirators. And I further told my cousin, usually when you think about this type of technology, where again, radio waves are being sent from our digital devices to towers, normally what you think about for this type of thing is some sort of cancer and some sort of DNA damage. So from the instant when I started hearing about this as a scientist, or should I say specifically as a biomedical scientist, certain questions in terms of the plausibility of this started being raised in my mind. And I'm going to come back to that at the end of this video. But right now I want to talk about some important considerations that I think people need to take into consideration when considering whether or not 5G is a health hazard and what kind of health hazards it can give rise to. So if you haven't, please like the video, as the likes are free. And so in this section of this discussion, I want to introduce some key terms and concepts. And the first two I want to discuss are correlation and causality. And these are two very, very important words in the science world. So correlation is the thought process that two things are happening at the same time, and this thing is happening because of this over here, and you're kind of inferring and you're kind of believing that this is causing this. So that's correlation. Do these two things go together, or do these things come together to cause this thing over here? So when you think about causality, now you're getting into an area where you're saying, okay, we know that this is causing this, or this is coming together with this to cause this outcome over here. So usually in an experimental context, in a hypothesis, which is an educated guess, you could hypothesize that, okay, A and B are coming together to cause C, but then you have to actually go ahead and prove that A and B coming together are the cause of C. Or you have to prove that A is causing B, or it's causing something else. So one of them is more speculative, that you have to prove, and the other one is actually proving that your speculation or your hypothesis is correct. So I hope I've explained that clearly. That's correlation and causality. And oftentimes the correlations we think of in our mind aren't necessarily true. So I also want to introduce the electromagnetic spectrum, which I think very much applies to this discussion. And so late last night when I was thinking about this video, it just came to me, that I need to discuss the electromagnetic spectrum, and that it very much applies here. So just briefly, what it is, the electromagnetic spectrum is a range of frequencies, the spectrum, of electromagnetic radiation and their respective wavelengths and photon energies. And so what the spectrum does is that it gives us a feel for the properties of sound, light, and radiation. Now this is going to take us into a discussion of physics and maybe a little bit of chemistry, but for the most part, physics, and there are lots and lots of applications for the spectrum. But in this instance, I just want to focus on the basic properties of the spectrum, and specifically wavelength and frequency. And so I'm going to show a chart, and there are tons and tons of these figures and charts on Google, but I chose this one because I thought it depicted the spectrum in the most comprehensive and easy. I thought it would be the easiest to explain this particular chart. So if you look at the top of the chart, what you see are wavelengths. And so going from left to right, you see that the wavelengths are larger. And as you go to the right side, they start to shrink like this. So you have large wavelengths and you have shorter wavelengths. And so when you go to the middle of that chart, you see multiple regions depicted. So you have, going from left to right, you have radio, microwaves, infrared, you have the visible light spectrum, you have ultraviolet, you have X-rays, and you have gamma rays. And so if you go to the bottom of that figure, what you see are designations of frequency. And so in terms of physics, and that was the first class in which I was introduced to this concept. Frequency is basically the unit for the movement of, in this instance, wavelengths. And the unit is cycles per seconds, or hertz. And so hertz is not just a rental car agency. And so there is a relationship between wavelength and frequency. And so if you look at the left side of the figure, the wavelengths are larger, but their frequency values are smaller. And so as you go from left to right, transitioning from radio to microwaves to infrared to visible light to ultraviolet to X-rays to gamma rays, finally, you see that your values for frequency increase as well. So, larger wavelength, smaller frequency, smaller wavelength, larger frequency. Ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays, that region, that's actually called, those are considered ionizing radiation. And so I'm pointing that out because you want to keep in mind that that region of that chart is on the complete opposite side than radio waves. And those that ionizing radiation, that's particularly dangerous because that can do things like cause DNA damage. And since I'm wearing a NASA shirt, one of the things that our Earth's atmosphere does is that it shields the biosphere, or the region of the planet where all the living things live. It shields us from that portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. And actually, spacesuits for astronauts are actually designed to protect astronauts from ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays from that portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. So with that, I'm going to now talk about what we know about 5G and its potential hazards to human health, the environment, and life. This concludes part 1 of my discussion regarding 5G and whether or not there is a plausible connection between it and the coronavirus or some other human sickness. This will be continued in part 2. Please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and always remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Take care, and I'll talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.